Hey gang, this is Don White and welcome to God's Money. This week we're going to do something a little bit different here on God's Money. We're going to talk about retirement plans, IRAs, 401ks, how they work, whether you should be involved, and whether that's really something that really makes sense. If you're given the opportunity to invest in a 401k through your company, and that's how you get into a 401k, boy, take advantage of it. I've been doing it now for years. I started my first 401k about 30 years ago, believe it or not. And I look at that account today, or those accounts, I should say, today, and they really make up probably the largest part of the funds that we have set aside, my wife Grace and I have set aside for the future. And I certainly think that it is a wise move for you to take advantage of that. If for no other reason, then your employer in many cases is going to be actually contributing right along with you, and the government is going to be contributing along with you by giving you the ability to deduct any contribution you made or not include any contribution you made in your taxable income. So here's the way a 401k works, or an IRA. First of all, a 401k is done through your employer. It's called a 401k not because we get crazy about numbers and stuff. It's because it's a section of the Internal Revenue Code. Section 401 of the Internal Revenue Code deals exclusively with retirement plans, all types. 401k, subsection K, deals with those retirement plans where you contribute and your employer makes a matching contribution. These are called contributory plans. Non-contributory plans, that's where an employer does it and you have nothing to do with it, so-called pension plans, and many of you are in those, are under different subsections. You are given a tremendous opportunity when you're given a 401k to set money aside and allow that money to grow without there being any tax on the contribution that you made or on the growth of those assets. Furthermore, when you take money out of that account, you are going to pay tax on it, but you're going to pay tax on what it is at that moment. So if your tax rate is higher, well, then you'd pay a little higher rate. If your tax bracket is lower, then you'd pay at a little lower rate. The Internal Revenue came up, actually the Congress came up with an idea which is now administered by the Internal Revenue Code, and it's called a Roth IRA. A Roth IRA or a Roth 401k, can be either one, is where you contribute but you don't take a tax deduction. So you forsake the tax deduction now, but it still allows those funds to grow on a totally tax-free basis, and when you retire, this is where it gets neat, you don't pay any tax, regardless of what the tax rates are. So if you're one of those people that think that tax rates are going to go up dramatically and you don't really necessarily mind paying a little bit of tax now, maybe that's a better alternative for you. It's something you should certainly look into. But keep in mind, you cannot do the maximum contribution in a 401k as an ordinary and a maximum contribution in a Roth, but you can split them up. What most people don't realize is that the most you can put into a 401k is not based upon the percentage of your income. It's based upon a specific dollar amount. Now, for 2017, that dollar amount is $18,000 unless you're over 50. If you're over 50 or 50 or older, I should say, then you can put in actually $24,000. Those are called a catch-up contribution. So those of us who are over 50, and I fall into that category, can put in $24,000 a year. Now, that does not include how much the employer puts in as a matching contribution. And so if, in fact, I want to contribute to my 401k, and I'd like to put, let's say, half of it in a Roth where I don't get a tax deduction and half of it into an ordinary IRA, can I do that? And the answer is yes, as long as the total amount does not exceed the limit of $18,000 or $24,000. Now, the employer's contribution will always go into an ordinary. It cannot go into the Roth. So that's just a little sidebar that you need to be aware of. So you do have to have that open. What is an individual retirement account, an IRA? An individual retirement account is where you're contributing and doing this totally on your own. It has nothing to do with your employer. You're making the contribution yourself. You are going to physically deduct that off of your tax return at the end of the year. Can you do an individual retirement account and a 401k? And the answer to that question is maybe. It depends on how much money you make. Suffice to say, most employees making, say, $50,000 or more are not allowed to do both. So if you're making more than $50,000, and most people probably are, you can't do both. You're going to have to do one or the other. I always tell everybody it's really not necessary to do both. You can, if you're making less than $50,000 away and you've got the ability to make a 401k contribution, just do it in the 401k. It's most times going to be cheaper for you, and you're going to be better served in that regard. Some mistakes that people make when it comes to 401ks and IRAs. The first mistake that I see people make is they under-contribute. When you under-contribute, you're essentially not taking advantage of the fact that your employer is making a match. So for example, if your employer matches 5% and you only put in 3%, that's an under-contribution just on the basis that you could have done the match. But more importantly, I see a lot of people who their employer, let's say, does a match of 5% and they limit themselves to 5% and almost thinking that's as much as they can do. Or I see other people that don't have an employer match, and so they think, oh, I shouldn't go into 401k. It's a bad investment. He's not doing anything. No. Most of the time, the employer's not putting money in because he just can't afford to. If you have a 401k that is available to you, take advantage of that. My basic rule of thumb is always start out putting as much money as you can into a 401k. I think 10% is probably a really good start. And the reason why I think 10% is a good start is because when you're putting 10% of your income into that, it's really not 10%. If you're in a, say, 25% tax bracket, it's really 7.5% is all that's net out of your taxes, because 25% is how much you would have paid in taxes on that money, but you don't. That's where the that's where the government is helping in this contribution as well. So take advantage of the fact that the government is giving you that benefit. It's just a tremendous, tremendous thing. And if you don't take advantage of it, you're going to lose it. The second mistake that people make in 401ks, in my opinion, very large one, is that they do not balance the money. They don't put it into an account which allows them to have diversification in their account and allows them to essentially have some risk aversion. Now, that may sound a little crazy to some of you, but you really do need to be somewhat risk averse. If you go into a 401k and you are 100% risky and things go against you, it can be a disaster. So don't do it. There are many, many companies now that have almost as a standard stopgap these so-called target date funds. And for example, in a target date fund, you can actually go in and say, you know what, I'd like you to set up and create a portfolio for me. Maybe it's done through the mutual fund company that's sponsoring the plan, American Funds or Vanguard or whoever, it doesn't matter, Fidelity. And they've got these target funds. And oftentimes those target funds are a tremendous, tremendous advantage. So look into them. Talk to the advisor of the plan about whether a target fund makes sense for you, because it's something you should probably look at. Some have lifestyle funds, and you should look at those lifestyle funds, see if those make sense to you. These are allocation programs that are made where they do the work for you. You don't have to sit there and try to figure out how much should I have in this, how much should I put 10% in this, 20% in that. If you don't have the knowledge to do that, you should find out if they have these already set up plans, because they'll do the work for you. And they usually are not going to charge you anything to do that. Zero, nothing. So it's really a cool concept that you can take advantage of. When it comes to saving in a 401k, what are the basic rules? The rules are put as much money in as you can. If you can put in the whole $18,000 or $24,000, go for it. And then make sure they're invested properly in a diversified account. We've talked about this verse a lot. It says divide your portion into 7, even 8 parts. You don't know what disaster is going to befall the earth, in Ecclesiastes 11 it tells us that. So do take advantage of the fact that you've got a 401k or an IRA. And when you do these, make sure that you know the rules for getting out. When you have a 401k, usually when you get ready to retire, you're going to want to roll that over to an IRA. Be careful. The basic rule is, if you're going to roll it to a 401k, make sure it goes custodian to custodian. Or if you're changing employers, make sure it goes custodian to custodian. Don't get that money paid to you, because there's a possibility that might end up being taxable to you. Easiest way to avoid it is make sure it goes custodian to custodian. So if it's at Fidelity now and it's going to Vanguard, make sure you do it custodian to custodian. Fidelity to Vanguard, not Fidelity to Don to Vanguard. No, that's a bad move. Now, I understand that is allowed once every 365-day period. They'll allow you to make one mistake. So if you mess up and it is paid to you, if you put it into that account within 60 days of receiving the money, that's not going to be a problem. They'll allow it, but it's a real hassle when it comes to your tax return because you have to be able to prove all of that. And you can only do it once in a 365-day period. So if you do it once and then you make the mistake again, too bad. Second one, can't fix it. The toothpaste is out of the tube. Can't do it. So don't make that mistake. The other thing that you need to be aware is be careful who you assign as beneficiaries. One of the big mistakes that I see people make with IRAs is they do not set up beneficiaries properly. Make sure you know who your beneficiaries are going to be. If you are married, it should be your spouse primarily. If you're not married, then think about who it is that you want to get these funds to, and then tell them about it. My goodness, it's the biggest mistake. If you don't tell your mom or your dad, or you don't tell your children, if you don't tell them that you have an IRA or 401k, how are they going to know? So tell them about these accounts. Tell them they are the beneficiaries. They have very specific responsibilities that they'll have to take care of if, in fact, they are those beneficiaries when they receive the money, to make sure they don't get taxed and so forth. We don't have time to get into all that today. But suffice to say, make sure that you have your beneficiaries set up and that they're set up properly. I hope this is helping you. I hope you are excited about the fact that we have this God's Money program. And remember, it's not your money, it's God's money. You guys have a great week.